Welcome back, everyone, to another Hearts of Iron 4 Dev Diary review, whatever you want to call it. And this time it's going to be about the exiled governments and the Imperial Federation that they have announced. So essentially, since, as they say, that this expansion is about navies and democracies, they want to kind of revamp what it is like, you know, to be the UK, and also what it is like to be annexed, because that's what democracies tend to do, apparently. Or rather, you know, they want to buff democracy so they can harbor these governments in exile, as we will see. Many nations overrun by the Axis would field at least a few small units of exiled forces. This is IRL, such as, but not limited to, the French, the Greeks, the Norwegians, the Dutch, and even the Czech. These served not only in the armies, but also the Air Force and the Navy, you know, the famous Polish pilots. The most well-known, however, are probably the Polish. At their height, they numbered almost 250,000 men and served with distinction in France, Norway, North Africa, Normandy, Northern Europe, and Eastern Europe too, while Polish pilots proved their mettle in the Battle for Britain, among others. The main focus of this feature is to give extra power to democracies in that nations that are conquered by, say, Germany will be able to function as a host nation. The democracies will be able to function as a host nation, or from a host nation, and lend their strength to them. So that's kind of like, you know, you're taking on the mantle of defender of these exiled, you know, brave exiled men in the struggle against fascism or whatever. And each government in exile has a certain amount of legitimacy, essentially how acknowledged they are by the governments in the world as the legitimate government. So obviously you want to keep the legitimacy as high as possible if you are the host nation, whereas if you are the occupant, maybe you're going to have some ways to, you know, take that, scale that down with some actions. Perhaps, you know, you're going to have events with occupations or puppet states that, you know, deal with how you're treating the conquered territory, and maybe you can, in the end, even, you know, put together a stable and legitimate government. Who knows? That would be cool. As you reach each step on the scale, the following things will happen and be unlocked, some in more than one place. The ability to train and deploy exile veteran divisions, which we will see below. That's for the host country. Ability to have air wings with exile manpower. These start at a higher experience level, obviously because, you know, they're veteran fighters. Exiled generals, these guys synergize well with exiled divisions. So you can see the Polish leader officer, you know, Polish exile leader offers him his service, and so he's gonna give your men, or rather your exiled troops, a bonus to attack and defense. Now, depending on whether or not you can choose the template of these, you know what? What the fuck? Anyway, sorry for that. I just wanted to play some music in the background so it's not as boring. Depending on whether or not you are allowed to change the template of the exile division, this will be very good or very bad. Well, maybe not very bad, but it's going to be more of a compensation for bad templates if you cannot change the templates. Because you know how the AI was with templates. That's what I'm, you know, kind of not really worried about, but like, because it's still kind of a cool feature. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm sort of worried about. So legitimacy is gained first and foremost by it's gained first before actually capitulating. The higher your war score, the better your starting legitimacy. If you just fold, transport all of your divisions to safety, or disband them, you won't get much, and the road to gaining will be much harder. So, you know, obviously the trade-off is if you have held back and now have more to give over to your host, or rather to carry to your host, you know, safe haven, and to continue on the fight, that's, of course, the trade-off, you know? You have more, but you have less legitimacy, so what you have is going to be less valuable, and you're going to have to sacrifice more of it to gain that legitimacy. Once you're actually in exile, you gain legitimacy by helping in the fight. This makes both historical sense and means that players have a good reason to fight as hard as possible. You know, pretty good gameplay mechanic there, just to make sure that you do bring in that fight. And yeah, you can see that there, Poland exiled. We now host Poland as a government in exile. They transferred 1% of their stockpile equipment, and 1 division managed to escape. Yeah, seems like they got, you know, pretty much plowed entirely in this like scenario. Anyway, once a nation has capitulated and is exiled, you can salvage some things depending on the legitimacy. Some of the stockpile may be spirited off, and some divisions may escape with severe equipment losses, so you're going to have to re-equip them, and will appear in the host nation after a long while, presumably sneaking across the channel in small boats or long detours. So essentially they're like, you know, they're like giving the explanation for that. These divisions will be exiled veterans, so you can see this is an exiled veteran division that is fighting, and the exiled veterans have combat bonuses versus the country that occupies them. I wonder if in the actual game, the tooltip, instead of just saying exiled veterans combat bonuses against one-on-one enemy divisions, it's actually going to tell you what the combat bonus is. Like, for example, exiled veterans combat bonus of plus 15% against one-on-one enemy divisions. You know, I feel like that would be pretty good. Also, it would be good if they had a combat malice against people that aren't their occupiers. But maybe that's just asking too much. I don't know. Yeah, I really do not know. Well, definitely if it was not in their faction, it should be a combat malice. Like, you know, if the allies are at war with both the Axis and the Comintern, and they end up, for example, harboring Yugoslavia's, let's say, divisions, and Yugoslavian veterans are then sent to fight against the Soviets and not against the Axis, they should have a combat malice against them because they are not involved in the occupation of Yugoslavia. That's just, you know, an idea, but I wonder how that's gonna end up playing out. An exiled veteran division is generally has a better experience level and has a combat bonus versus the occupiers. We already talked about this. They're trained in much the same way as colonial forces are for those that own Together for Victory. And you get access to both their templates and your own. Oh, okay, well, I guess that answers my question. Another question, though, arises. What if you don't have Together for Victory? Can you still train them? I sure hope so. I have no idea. So, playing an exile. Playing an exile is something I think would be more popular in multiplayer than single player, because you are limiting yourself quite a bit. Well, see, the thing is, that's where they're wrong, because honestly, someone like me, who plays quite a bit of Hearts of Iron, you know, gets pretty used to most of the situations that you end up in, and so is able to deal with them relatively well. Like, you know, honestly, Hearts of Iron doesn't really challenge you as much as some other games. So honestly, being in a different situation, I think I'd like that. So, you know, it would be something that I'd play, you know, once or twice just to try it out. But hey, why not? But for those who like a challenge, we wanted to make sure that it was possible and to give you some of these advantages as well. Thank you. If your host is an AI, it will be trying to be helpful in this case by passing over control of veteran divisions arriving. Exile commanders will also be under your control. Because some exiles will have no land at all, you will likely depend on the master for lend-lease of equipment to arm your divisions with, which, you know, makes sense. If you're totally landless, you will be getting a trickle of manpower based on your legitimacy as well. So that probably represents people like defecting away and trying to reach you. Poland is most likely in this position, while Netherlands or France wouldn't necessarily be. I don't understand why. Like, France itself could bloody fight, you know, in exile. Like, the Netherlands, yeah, sure, they were sent all the way to the East Indies, and then the East Indies, you know, were taken over by the Japanese, but that's something else entirely. But with France, they, like, it's kind of a meme that France did not fight in World War II, but, yeah, they did. Like, well, I don't have the data right now to back up my claims, nor the nor the citations, but just believe me, go look it up. They did fight. When you're in exiled nations, you can keep track of your legitimacy on the country screen, as well as bring up the more detailed view like the host nation can. So you can see, you know, who's benefiting from what. And exiled nations have decisions to help, you know, the struggle from the exile. And we also plan for exiles of nations that don't fall normally, like Czechoslovakia, to come into existence from decisions. You know, this would be great for the Great War mod, because of the way the story of Czechoslovakia's sort of formation goes, actually. But I'm not gonna go ahead and digress into that. Just, you know, it's actually pretty interesting. It would just be interesting as a whole to have ways to form exile governments for modding purposes, even when that government technically is not a tag that exists on the map. You know, maybe it was annexed, maybe it's maybe it never existed in the game in the first place. You just, it's kind of like representing a country supporting the independence of an independence movement in another country. So, like, for example, you could well, you could, for example, represent, you could say something in the modern day, perhaps in a modern day mod, where you have, like, who knows, maybe some country wants to, like, divide up Iraq, so they, like, make a decision to create a government in exile for Kurdistan or something. Who knows? You know, I'm pretty sure you can find better examples than I can off the top of my head for this kind of mechanic being very useful for mods. So I do hope that that's going to be sort of organically placed into the game, and not just that's something that's scripted for, you know, for just like Czechoslovakia or, I don't know, Soviet Poland. I mean, they might, you know, do something like that. If I'm making any sense, I'm sure you'll understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, and then there's the Imperial Federation, which obviously it's just like super UK, right? So essentially, the Imperial Federation is it's a path that they added because they didn't have it in the earlier rendition of the British focus tree that they revealed like a couple of weeks ago. Well, a couple of weeks, more like a month or so ago. And yeah, the Imperial Federation will be pretty strong, and the way that they're going about the federalizing of the Empire seems pretty good. You know, I have rearranged the development of the Dominions path branch to reinforce the Empire path and added 3 new focuses. I've developed Canada, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. It is possible to kick off the Imperial Conference, which is something that is historical. You know, it did happen with all the Dominions and the British government getting together and, you know, kind of plotting out a future course for the Empire or something. And doing so will send a notification event to all parties involved, including yourself, which then activates the Imperial Conference decision. So the Imperial Conference allows you 2 months to discuss Imperial Defense, trade, economy, appeasement, and the Imperial Federation. So it would be better from a strategy point of view, most likely, since all these cost political power, to just save up a bunch of political power before you actually do that, and then you hold it. So then Imperial Defense is just everyone gets production bonuses and, you know, just tries to cooperate for common defense. Imperial Trade switches everyone's lost to free trade, so you can get their resources. You know, not the most useful thing in the world, considering Canada, New Zealand, and as far as I know, Australia too don't really have that many resources. Whereas obviously Raj and a little bit South Africa, if I recall correctly. I've been playing too many mods, so I don't exactly remember how these countries are when it comes to resources in vanilla. But yeah, they aren't really the biggest resource powerhouses. Still though, it's better than nothing. Imperial economy, each dominion that accepts gains a 10% construction speed bonus to civilian and military factories, so, you know, trying to integrate the imperial economy. And then the appeasement. Now, I have no idea if it's supporting appeasement or preventing appeasement. but it gives people war support. So they probably could have just called it, you know, mobilization or something. Who knows? And then in the end, if they accept, because they can deny, you know, these, you could say clauses, these treaties. If they deny, no, nothing happens. But if they accept, they get opinion, which I'm pretty sure will influence how likely they are to accept other proposals, such as the Imperial Federation. But I'm not sure. They don't talk about this in the diary. At least I didn't see it when I read it. So yeah, this gives you a way to improve opinion, and rather than simply improving relations. You know, quite good. Of course, note that all variables are subject to change based on testing. Obviously. And yeah, so they're showing the event pictures. And obviously you can also, okay, so, well, it says solely based on your Dominion's opinion. Okay. You can also invest various degrees of political power, 25 or 50, to influence the outcome. So again, you know, just save up a bunch of political power. Influencing them will double and triple, respectively, the chance of them saying yes, but the only thing that will absolutely guarantee it is if they have 100 opinion of you. Which, to be honest, doesn't seem all that difficult to do. Just send them some, like, lend-lease or something. And they'll love you. And then, after a while, you're gonna be sort of snowballing it because they're accepting all the other things anyway. So, I don't know, whatever. So Australia accepts. There you can see what happens when they accept. And then finally there is the Imperial Federation. It costs 100 political power from the start. You can also do the you know, diplomatic effort to persuade them. Now, yeah, essentially it does not have any effect unless at least Canada, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand unanimously accept the motion, so the normal dominions. India is not normally a dominion, they're a colony, I think, and like, you know, what they're represented as in the game. They were not a dominion, and so if you want their support, you will have to first make them one. This is where the new Indian autonomy focus comes in. Now, this is weird because you're reducing the autonomy to then increase it later, which is kind of a funny little thing. Taking this will make the Raj a dominion and will give them plus 0.5 autonomy gain for 2 years, so they're getting more autonomous. If you do this before the Imperial Federation, the Raj may, following the same opinion restrictions as the other dominions, accept the Federation proposal. Whereas if you do not grant them autonomy, they will always reject it, and you have to sort of kick them out of the Empire to get that integration process rolling without the Raj dragging it down, which I like. You know, kind of giving you something to kind of punish you if you're not doing things the way that you're supposed to do. So it looks like the Indian autonomy focus will be very powerful if you're going with the Imperial Federation. Now, where is exactly the... Yeah, the Indian autonomy down there. So you're going to have to do a little bit of extra focuses. And yeah, so essentially, after they accept, then they receive a national spirit that reduces their autonomy by -3 per day. So it doesn't actually form the Imperial Federation instantly. It is a slow process. Well, relatively slow. It's not as slow as it would be at IRL, but yeah, it's kind of a ramp up to it. So you have people that are dominions that then become colonies, that then become, you know, whatever next level. I think it's puppet, and then integrated puppet. And then once they become integrated puppet, where is it? Hello? Yeah, because here it's talking about the annexation. Where is it? Why am I retarded? Okay, all the way down to integrated puppet. And these, okay, and once all of them are at that autonomy level, you can take the Imperial Federation focus, which annexes everyone, and turns you into the Commonwealth of Nations if you're democratic. Not the Imperial Federation. The Imperial Federation is only if you're not aligned. I don't know. Yeah, apparently. So anyway, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand they will just be completely annexed and they will be cored. South Africa will be annexed but not cored, whereas the British Raj, and by annexed I mean like integrated annex, so they give all the army, equipment, and leaders to the UK. But to illustrate cultural differences and lingering anti-British sentiment there, their core states will not become core states of the UK. To be honest, it does make sense for some areas of South Africa, but some others perhaps should be cored, you know? Like, yeah, the British majority areas should probably just be cored. You know, like I understand that like the Boer areas will not be cored, like whatever, I don't know. So that's about it, and the British Raj will not be cored. So essentially this is the way it is. So thank you all for joining, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.